James, although you were involved in Disneyland Records earlier on, your animation writing career seems to have started not with a small step, but with a bang.
Yes,
so
you're absolutely right.
Talking about Gummy Bears, a series that marked an entire generation and that is now being rediscovered. So
yes,
how do you remember those days?
It's very interesting because people will ask me, I speak at a lot of different locations around the world. I teach animation writing, blah, blah, blah. And people ask me, well, what steps did you take in your career to get where you are? And I said, I don't know, because I never followed a path. I fell into producing records. I fell into, story editing television shows, and not really any groundwork. I never studied in college for, those types of things. So I feel like I've been very fortunate, but I also tell people, don't try and follow what I did, because it's being in the right place at the right time, I guess. So when TV animation rolled around and Michael Eisner said he wanted a show called The Gummy Bears, based on some candy that his kids had eaten at camp, I said, oh, okay, great. That's a great idea. And afterward, I said, this is the stupidest idea. Who wants to do a show about where the main characters get eaten all the time? And we said, well, I guess we ought to do something. I don't know. And so I was supposed to write up a premise, a proposal for what the show was. And you have to remember that Michael Eisner took over the company, and in doing so, took on everything at once, all the films that were in production, all the films that were being released, just everything from every corner of the company. And I figured he's never going to remember he talked to me about, Gummy Bears. And then about 3 weeks later, I got a call, and it was a secretary saying, Mr. Eisner would like to talk to you. Oh, geez. Okay. Hello. And he says, how's Gummy Bears coming along? I said, I'm working on it right now. I hadn't written anything. So it was very nerve-wracking. And I came up with some really, really excellently bad ideas. And fortunately, we threw those out and eventually, copyrighted the name Gummy Bears, even though Gummy Bears is a common name. It's a public domain name. It means rubber bears in German, Gummi Bears. And it's like saying jelly beans, And so we finally nailed this show down, and they married me with Art Vitello, and they said, okay, guys, go make the show. Bye. We had no desks, no offices, no crew, no pencils. I mean, we had nothing, and we started with nothing and built TV animation out of that. Anyway, it was a very exciting time because Art Vitello said he always loved the old classic Disney films, which were all, European fairy tales. Pinocchio, Peter Pan, and well, that's English, but a Snow White and whatnot. And I said, are you kidding? I love that time period. I love the look of it. So we said, that's what we're going to do with Gummy Bears. We're going to set it in kind of a medieval European location. And it just built from there.
So Gummy Bears, then DuckTales.
Yes.
Without any doubt, one of the most important shows in TV history.
Yes. Yes. It was interesting. I did 2 seasons of Gummy Bears and never got along with the people in charge over there. And when the 3rd season came around, they said, yeah, we'll pick it up for another season, but we think it would go better if Jim wasn't involved. Okay. So they basically fired me from a show that Art and I gave them, which was a #1 show on Saturday morning. And it's like, I was devastated. It's like, how can they do this? And I remember saying to my boss at the time, now what do I do? He says, oh, are you kidding? we're doing DuckTales. Go over there. So, oh, okay. Went over there, and they were writing frantically, you know, episode. And I thought, well, okay, you know, I certainly read a lot of Carl Barks stories, you know, in the Dell comics and whatnot. And they said, no, we don't want you to do those episodes. We want you to do like a 5-part miniseries that we can show part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Monday through Friday, but we can also cut it together and make a 2-hour pilot film out of it. And that's exactly what they did. So when we wrote it as one full story broken into 5 different episodes. And that was the Treasure of the Golden Suns. And it went amazingly well because we had to introduce all the characters and bring Donald Duck in and get rid of him because he wasn't allowed to be on TV. And I think what was really fun about that was that even though there were all these other episodes that were being written, no one had seen them yet. So the first thing that the American audience saw was this 5-part miniseries, Treasure of the Golden Suns. And it set up who Uncle Scrooge was, how the nephews ended up with him, what happened to Donald Duck, who are all these other characters. And I think more than anything, that set a tone. It gave the audience a pair of glasses to watch the other episodes with. And so in many respects, even though I didn't write, you know, the early episodes, it ended up being the first episode that the audience saw. And it went so well that I think I did 2 or 3 other miniseries that were cut into movies. And I had no idea that I was so amazing. You know, I was just so amazing. And what's interesting about it is, and you're not going to believe this, but I believe it. You know, you were asking about my career, and when I started working on Gummi Bears, I had never written a television screenplay, a teleplay, and I was the story editor, however, on the show. So I read everything that was written. I handed out assignments. I worked with all the writers. And in going through and editing and making everything homogenous, I kind of taught myself, oh, this is what a animation script looks like. And, but during the whole 2 years I was there, I never had written a Gummi Bear script. And I hadn't written any script with my name on it. And so it was really weird that after I had done several of these DuckTales miniseries projects, that they said, we want you to write an episode. It's like, oh, okay. And I took a Carl Barks story. I think it was called The Status Seeker. And I used this Carl Barks story that he'd written, and I turned it into a Uncle Scrooge story where he's looking for the mask of Cthulhu Lulu. And it was fun because I got to write up this half-hour show, and then what's this on the front page? By Jymn Magon. You know, it was the first time I had ever, you know, gotten sole credit, written it by myself. So it took a few years for me to finally write an animation script, but it wasn't difficult, you know. So I gotta say, I've been very fortunate that so much has happened in my career that you know, every movie you see, every TV show you see, every book you read, everything feeds into that creative monster inside of you that says, I want to get out, I want to do something, you know. And so from then on, it was more story editing, more show creation, and a lot more writing.
It's interesting, the thing you said about the source material of Carl Barks, because I was going to ask you about it, but the creative team I was surprised to know that they weren't that. Or did I understand well, or that the creative team wasn't that interested in going to Carl Barks stuff?
That's a really good question, because the show had been created and begun, and 2 story editors from outside had been hired to spearhead the show, and that was Ted and Nasty and Patsy Cameron, and they were going a mile a minute down the hall with their crew and whatnot, and I knew them, but it's like we didn't hang together or anything. So my little crew that was doing these miniseries was separate from them, and so did they decide to use Carl Barks stories? My impression is there are a couple that were taken from the comics, but the show DuckTales was actually created by David Wiemers, a writer, and he created Launchpad McQuack and all kinds of stuff. And I never spoke to David about it. It's like he was in the room next to me, and I never said, "Hey, did you use any Carl Barks stuff?" My impression is that the team of Ted and Patsy just sort of steered clear of it. I'm not sure why, but they did. In fact, this is going to sound weird, but I always felt like there would be no DuckTales. There would be no Duckburg, Scrooge McDuck, Beagle Boys, Gyro Gear Loose, Magic of Dispel. None of those characters would be on television if they hadn't been created by Carl Barks. And I always felt like, where's his name on this? This world would not exist without his genius. And I feel kind of fortunate that I actually saw the man once. He was eating in the corner of the dining room. But he wasn't writing cartoons at that time. He was an elderly man. And so when I wrote the Status Seeker, I made sure that it said story by Carl Barks, screenplay Jymn Magon. And I'm not positive, but I think that may be the only time his name ended up on the screen. I'm not sure. He deserves it,
I was really curious about that. If the more people in the creative team were Carl Barks fans, or
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, you know what? I don't know, because like I said, everybody in my generation, kind of grew up with the same comics and the same TV shows and whatnot. And, nobody knew Carl Barks's name, but they knew that he was the duck guy. That's the good duck guy, And so everybody liked his stuff, even though they didn't know who he was. Did the people working there know who he was, or what his legacy was? I don't know. I'm not sure. I've never really bothered to ask people that, but I think it's probably a safe assumption to say, yeah, these people, had read his stuff, maybe didn't know it was him, but Carl Barks.
How were your expectations towards the series before you had an audience reaction?
Are you talking DuckTales or Gummi Bears?
DuckTales.
DuckTales. Well, you have to remember, DuckTales had never been aired before, so nobody knew what it was or how brilliant it was going to be, and or how popular, because we worked on a system. I need to explain this, so just bear with me. When you write for network television, they want everything in lumps of 13. 13 times 2 is 26, times 2 is 52. That's a year. And so when they order a season, they want 13 episodes, 13 and a half hours. Okay, great. After that, we decided, we meaning Buena Vista Television, said, why don't we just sell our stuff directly to the broadcasters and skip the networks? And so that was called, I'm blanking, it'll come to me.
Syndication?
I'm trying to think who was the first one. It may have been it may have been DuckTales. And they said, we want to do not 13, but we want to do 65 half hours, right? And that meant 5 days a week. And 5 goes into 65, 13 times. So there's the magic 13 again, right? So they knew if they could get a package of 65 episodes, they could go to the individual markets around the country and sell, how would you like, DuckTales? How would you like whatever? And so what happened was the DuckTales became so popular that they actually went in and said, let's make 100. I don't know why, but they made 100 of them. However, from that point on, every time we started a new series, whether it was Rescue Rangers, TaleSpin, Goof Troop, or whatever, it was 65 episodes. That was the order. So we got really used to saying, that's what we're going to do. So that was a lot more work than just saying, let's do 13, episodes. When I did TaleSpin, I created that show, I don't remember, not in the early 90s or something. And we did 65 episodes, half hours. And it turned out we did that in a year and a half. That's how long it took to write it and, produce it and get it animated. And that amount of footage from episode 1 to episode 65 is the same amount of footage that the Disney classic films from Snow White to Jungle Book were, just in length. Now, I'm not talking quality, I'm just talking length. Well, Disney Productions feature team took decades to do that. We had to do ours in a year and a half. So it was pretty hectic.
It was certainly a revolutionary era in television, the 80s.
Yeah.
How do you position the production of animation like Gummi Bears, DuckTales, Rescue Rangers in the context of the time of the of television production? What was the biggest impact in the business itself?
That's actually a really good question. I started watching animation in the 50s, and I think the first TV show was Crusader Rabbit, and then Hanna-Barbera started making Rough and Ready, and I think the animation business was adjusting from doing 7-minute cartoons theatrically to doing half-hour television shows that were due every week. And so a lot of shortcuts were made, like people running down an endless hallway, and they tried to figure out the easiest animation they could. And that became the norm from the 50s up through the 80s. And so everyone that was in the animation business, television animation, was doing this, very simple storyboards and whatnot. And then we came along and said, well, we don't want to do it that way. We want these to look like little movies as opposed to, the typical hackneyed, running down the hallway things. And I think we always felt like, we're doing pretty well. Well, in animation, to animate somebody on a horse coming at the camera like this, you have to change the perspective because it's going to get bigger as it gets closer. In other ways, you always keep the same size when you're going this way across the screen. So we had all kinds of different camera angles and whatnot. And I always thought, that's pretty cool. We're doing that. Then we started hearing from other people because we were getting bigger. Then we started hiring other people from other studios, and they were like, who's Disney? Where did they come from? How are they doing this stuff? They were blown away that we had basically lifted the bar in television animation as to what to expect. So I think, this is going to sound stupid because I'm a guy in the trenches, right? I can't stand back like a general and look at the battlefield and say, oh, well, this is all, we're geniuses. we were just there working, and pretty soon a lot of people were working and doing the same stuff. So my impression is that I think we gave a shot in the arm to the animation business on television.
It's still one of the shows that has one of the most powerful animations ever. As a big fan,
like when I agree with you?
Yeah. As a big fan of the original series, I must confess that I had mixed feelings when I first heard about the reboot. What are your thoughts about the new series?
Well, what are you going to do? I actually wrote to whoever, the powers that be, and said, I'm Jymn Magon. I worked on the originals. I did this, and this. Nobody ever called me back. My agent called. Nobody ever called me back. I ended up at I think it was a anniversary get together for TV animation, and I got to actually meet the guys that were producing DuckTales. And I said, I always felt bad that you guys never really called me. And they said, we'd love to have you, Well, okay, what am I doing wrong here? So basically, I'm not going to step on any toes or furrow any brows, because I never did work on the show, and I don't think I know anyone who did either from the old days. They're doing a lot of very clever things by mixing different shows into DuckTales, including TaleSpin characters and Darkwing Duck and whatnot. But that's not something we would have ever done back then. And I don't particularly like the style of it. It's a little too sketchy for me. But I assume the show is popular, that kids are watching it, and yay, So.
They are watching as I told you, I have a 5-year-old, and he likes the show very much, but he also likes very much the original one.
Good. Good.
He's a fan also.
Our fan base, 5-year-old fan base.
Yeah. With all your experience, when you look back at the transformations of the business in the last 3 decades, what strikes you the most? What are the
are you talking in television specifically?
in animation?
Well, that's a really good question. I think there was a time when an animated feature would come out every couple years, maybe, from Disney, and some other studios tried doing some features, and there was some were successful and some weren't. And now it seems like every studio on the planet is making a feature every year. So, I think with the arrival of Pixar and their popularity and their success, Toy Story just blew everybody's socks off. It was Toy Story. And so the fact that Disney eventually, I don't know what their deal was, but they think they bought Pixar or whatnot. And so now you've got all these different films. Some are CG. Not many are hand-drawn anymore, 2D animation. But it isn't just Disney doing this. You've got Universal, you've got Blue Sky, you've got DreamWorks. All these people are making feature films. And what's interesting is where there never used to be enough animation to vote on for a best picture or whatnot, now everybody's got, an animation department working. So I think what was great is that, Michael Eisner breathed life into television animation when he started up our new department, and Pixar inspired everybody to, hey, I could do that. Now that's not to say that what they do is simple. Actually, their storytelling is very clever and complex. But I've traveled through Europe, and it's like all these little studios over there are making TV and films. stuff we've never even heard of, and they are being made over there. So I'm tickled because it seems like you asked about the last 30 years. It seems like there's been a renaissance in the animation business, and not just because Disney did something. It's been interesting to watch how fascinated the audience is with this type of entertainment.
Yeah, I cannot help feeling that there is a crescent resistance to the most sweet and carefree side of children TV, with heavy doses of irony and adult stuff introduced early on. As I see it, it's like if we were used to see good stories for children that had some cool and interesting subtext for adults, and now it's almost the other way around. Sometimes it seems like I'm watching a cartoon that mostly speaks to adults, and that's something for the kids. Although we're talking not of animation as adult entertainment that it can be, but as animation, kids television. What are your thoughts regarding this?
You're touching a very interesting nerve there, because in this country, we have a station called Cartoon Network, and they show lots of cartoons. And, Disney shows cartoons and whatnot. But late at night, Cartoon Network has a thing they call Adult Swim. Only the adults get to swim after 9 o'clock, So everything that they show is an adult animated show. So it could be Family Guy or Bob's Burgers or Simpsons or whatnot. And obviously not aimed at small children. So that's a new twist also. When I was a kid, we had a primetime show called The Flintstones, the Jetsons, right? And it was just like, cartoon sitcoms. But now everything is, a little more fancy. May I tell an anecdote about broadcast standards and practices? This isn't right on the head of what you were asking, but I feel like I want to say it anyway. When we worked with the networks, we worked with NBC and CBS, and eventually Disney, I think, bought ABC. Every time we would turn in a script, the powers that be would read it and give notes, and then they would send it over to a department called BS&P, which is funny when you say that. That stands for Broadcast Standards and Practices. And we would get these notes back saying, well, you can't have a character, jump through glass and, stuff like that. Okay. So when we ended up getting away from the network and doing our own productions, it was nice because Broadcast Standards and Practices was us. We made our own decisions what was going to go on the air and what wasn't. And I've always been kind of a straight arrow. It's like, yeah, we're Disney. We don't do anything awful, And in the first episode of the first DuckTales show that I worked on, I don't know what was going through my head, but I had all three of the nephews on a rope. I will show you something. This is a rope. Anyway, they swing through shot, all three hanging on, and they smash through a factory window. Glass goes everywhere. And it wasn't until the movie got made and aired, and somebody asked me about it and said, why did you do that? I said, it just seemed exciting. They said, you broke like the first rule of Broadcast Standards and Practices. It's like, oh my God, I did. How did I let that get by me? So anyway, but there are little things that you don't think about, which in my generation, we were dumb kids. We just did it,